But for more on this, we are now being joined by journalist and political expert James Jackson. He's joining us live from Berlin. Welcome to WION, James. First up, the regional polls in Germany are taking place over 1 week after the stabbing incident in Solingen. Talk to us about the major issues that will dominate the polls in these two eastern German states today.
So across Germany as a whole, migration has been moved to the top of the political debate in terms of priority, where it has actually been for months now. But I do think that in the Eastern German elections, there is one more topic that we haven't mentioned so far, and that is German support for Ukraine. Eastern Germany, of course, was a separate country for many years, and many of the inhabitants have felt neglected by the way that the reunification process happened, and have some cultural differences as well, which came about from growing up under dictatorship, which was aligned with the Soviet Union. Now, at the time, the Soviet Union was very unpopular, and people voted against, or people protested and wanted to be part of the West. 30 years on, and it looks like a different story, with many East Germans preferring what they call a diplomatic solution in Ukraine, i.e. negotiations with Russia. They do not like Ukrainian refugees coming into their sparsely populated and sometimes under-resourced communities. And at the same time, they seem to have some problems with with migration as a whole. So it's not just about, they have problems with, sorry about that, they have problems with Ukraine and with Western support for Ukraine.
Right, James, and like you mentioned, that the AfD party has opposed Germany's support for Ukraine, which is perhaps one of the factors that is driving their rise. But I also want to talk about German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's SDP party, which has not been doing well in the polls recently. Why is that? What are the reasons?
It's not just the SPD, it's the whole traffic light coalition, which is made up of SPD, Greens and FDP. This was always a very Western German orientated coalition. The Greens and the FDP in particular never have done really very well in the East. They're seen as sort of middle class Western German parties that don't look out for people in the East. The East is somewhat how both more right wing and more left wing. So there have been the Left Party, which is set to lose power in Thuringia, despite a very popular First Minister, Bodo Ramelow. And now replacing them in many cases is this very interesting party called the BSW. So this is Germany's first party that's named after a single individual, Sarah Wagenknecht, who was a leader in the Left Party, but moved out because she was very critical of migration as well as refugees and support for Ukraine. So she's quite a populist figure, very much regular on German talk shows, and has created a bit of a personality force within her party. Now, she actually could be, and this is one of the big questions about how, if it's possible for the AfD to come to power, whether it would be through a coalition or an informal agreement with the BSW. But they're this kind of interesting left-wing and right-wing party, left-wing on economics and right-wing on migration and anti-Ukraine. And now it looks like the CDU have to possibly go into form a coalition with this new upstart party led by a left-wing figure, populist figure. So really quite uncharted territory in German elections right now, I think.
Right, James, I was just coming to that what would an AfD victory mean for the governments in these two eastern German states, Saxony and Thuringia? The question being that, will it be able to govern in these states? Because a lot of parties have come out in open and have said that they will not collaborate with the AfD party.
It's almost impossible for the AfD to govern in Saxony, but there are question marks over Thuringia, which has always been an outlier state. As I said, they're the only state with a left-led government, currently, but that party has lost almost all of its support in the previous years. So what could happen, and this is actually, I think, a chart to the AfD for government, possibly, if the FDP, Greens, and SPD, which are, the governing parties, don't get into on the federal level, don't get into parliament, at least the Greens and FDP, then that means that their seats will be given in a rearrangement of the German state parliament, and the AfD could have enough to govern possibly with the BSW. So let's not rule the AfD out yet. It's unlikely in Saxony, it's almost impossible, but I think there is actually a narrow path for a government, an AfD-led government in Thuringia. But either way, this is a tough day for the government and for the democratic opposition to swallow, because one of the promises of post-war Germany was always the fascists won't come back. And actually, a court has ruled that the leader of the AfD in Thuringia, Björn can legally be called a fascist. So the fact that this party, which has been observed by the federal intelligence service as right-wing extremist, or in parts, is getting so close to victory, is already something that is shocking many Germans to their core.
Right, last question to you, James. Talk to us more about how the regional polls today in the two eastern German states, how it is a litmus test for the federal elections in Germany next year, and how perhaps it is posing as a threat to Scholz's coalition government.
There is already across Germany a huge amount of dissatisfaction with the traffic light government. It's seen as infighting, unable to achieve anything, and divided, while there is nowhere that this is more true than the East. So the timing of this election is extremely bad for Scholz's government. Scholz has had a pretty tough reign and a pretty tough period of government in terms of circumstances, Ukraine, the energy crisis, all of these issues which I've been telling your listeners about for years. But actually, I think it's possibly got harder than ever because of recent concerns about migration, backed up by likely terrorist attacks in Mannheim and in Solingen. So people have lost trust in the government. And when that happens, in many cases, the AfD benefit, or the democratic conservative opposition, the CDU, led by Friedrich Merz, are benefiting as well. And so that we shouldn't forget that this is not just a story about the AfD. It's also a story about the CDU, who are polling first nationally, who won the European elections, and who are polling first in Saxony, and a very close second, or at least a close second, in Thuringia. So actually, it seems like Germany is ready for a move to the right or to the centre-right.
Right, James, thank you for joining us and WION with your insights. We'll, of course, be tracking the polls in Germany very closely here on WION.
Thanks for having me.